devotees were feeling our founder Acharya. Sorry, Prabhuji. So that's a recording integration. So
It's okay.
I remember that past time Prabhuji shared how in Mayapur, once he heard a young brahmachari, and they said it's Prabhupada, the parents' day, and said, I didn't keep the fast because he's not my guru, he's your guru. So such things, they break our heart to understand lack of connection with Prabhupada. And then from that year, he began researching and presenting his wonderful seminar series on Srila Prabhupada being founder Acharya. And then the encouraging from MIHE and GBC on Srila Prabhupada's position, Prabhuji began presenting series of seminars worldwide from 2012 onwards. And he has been teaching, this streamlined version of Founder Acharya's Essentials. It's a 10 session seminar, 10 series. And I was fortunate to hear it. And also it is very unique presentation because that book, Our Founder Acharya by Jayananda Prabhu, it is a very scholarly book. It is difficult to digest. That the book Prabhuji has written on the founder Acharya Prabhupada. That book is a very like a scholarly book. It is not and it is also not well distributed also. But the seminars very much help us in connection. And I also very much like Prabhuji that how you divided the whole thing into Sambandha, Abhidaya and Prayojan. How the Sambandha is to develop our deepening, not develop, but deepening our relationship with Prabhupada. And the Abhidaya being how to deepen our commitment to his mission, and the Prayojan being how to develop our love for Srila Prabhupada. And we also, I very much like Prabhuji that GBC SPT seminar, which was there last year, which you took with on that Prabhupada being our preeminent Siksha Guru. So all of us, we watched that recording. We all watched later the recording, and it was very, very heart touching. And then a few days back, I also was speaking to Chintamani Mataji in Manor, and she asked me to go through her website. So I saw your seminar series posted on their website, also Improving Sangha. And I started hearing again. And there in that I found your email address in that second series you gave for the notes, that those who want to give the notes. And so I contacted Prabhuji and I requested him to take a session on this to our Sangha. Currently, Prabhuji, we are around 15-16 devotees here. All of them are from our preaching team. So they are all preaching. All of them are preachers. Barring one or two, everybody's preaching. Primarily online classes, but they are preaching. And the idea to bring them here together was that we hear together, because together when we sit, it becomes a little more enriching to hear together and personal. And then once the seminar is over, then over prasadam we can discuss what did we hear, what did we understand, like that. Because alone when we hear, then we think, then we get busy, and so that is a little bit about us, Prabhuji. And we are very, very grateful to you for accepting our request. We are a small group, but you have accepted, so we are very, very thankful.
Well, small is beautiful.
So we heartily welcome Prabhuji by loudly chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare
Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. So this is a nice, small, serious group. This is an ideal group. I mean, it's not ideal that I'm not there with you, physically, then I could do more. But I'll tell you, I've been reaching more people on Zoom. Probably you've experienced it too. That's of course, the silver lining of the pandemic is that we can be together all over the world. I'm just getting a message on my computer. Let's see. Anyway, all right. So yeah, when I'm in person, like Prabhu said, he got the link to my presentation in Melbourne, Australia in 2019. That was the last time I did this live, actually. Yeah, because 2020, the pandemic came in February, March. So yeah, it's about twice as long because I tell more stories and singing songs, and you know, it's like a performance to try to give people a Prabhupada experience. But this is, in a way, this is even better because in the complete series, I did have a Q&A, as Prabhu saw afterwards. But here, I just touch on the essential points. I call it Founder Acharya Essentials. And then I just open it up. So it's more of a parasparang bhavayantak, you know, it's more discussion. Tushanticha, ramanticha. So I think we can just start. It's where I am, it's almost 7:30 a.m. and where you are, it's almost 8 p.m. But why don't we just start? There's no reason why we can't start.
Yes, please.
Okay, so let me go to my script again. And as long as you all can hear, that's fine. Okay. Well, Hare Krishna. Prabhus, I've chosen, the topic is Srila Prabhupada's position as our preeminent Siksha Guru. So that nicely fit into the last lesson I teach of my seminar series. So ideally, when people take the series, they take it one after another from lessons 1 through 10. But the good news is that each lesson also can stand alone. So we're going to do that. We're going to let this last lesson stand alone. I call it Your Srila Prabhupada. So before we look at some ways to access and nourish our own personal foundational relationship with Srila Prabhupada, let's consider how our founder Acharya is for everyone. So the first way I present is Prabhupada as the universal teacher. Now, once upon a time, when the the North American BBT would publish the Vyasa Puja book, which they still do every year, they used to also publish Prabhupada's 1935 Vyasa Puja to his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, which Prabhupada spoke. He was the keynote speaker when the Gaudiya Math launched their Bombay branch. So maybe you've seen this. It's a rather famous address. And then, of course, Prabhupada also wrote a poem, which pleased his Guru Maharaj even more. Especially the line, the couplet, absolute ascension thou hast proved, impersonal calamity thou hast moved. So universal teacher. The year was 1935. In February, Abhay Charanaravinda Das spoke at the Vyasa Puja celebration of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in Bombay. Not only was the Thakur Abhay's spiritual master, he was the founder Acharya of the entire Gaudiya mission, which had ignited a renaissance of Krishna consciousness throughout the Indian subcontinent. Addressing the assembly, Abhay declared, quote, so this is an excerpt from Prabhupada's address. The Acharya Dev, to whom we have assembled tonight to offer our humble homage, is not the guru of a sectarian institution or one out of many differing exponents of the truth. On the contrary, he is the Jagat Guru, the guru of all of us. The only difference is that some obey him wholeheartedly, while others do not obey him directly, unquote. Now that was in 1935. 36 years later, it was 1971. Srila Prabhupada is in San Francisco, California, USA, to celebrate the Rath Yatra there, because in America, Rath Yatra started in San Francisco. Okay, so in 1971, after Prabhupada had become ISKCON's founder Acharya, a reporter, after the Rath Yatra, a reporter was interviewing him, asked him how many followers he had. Quote, "Unlimited," Prabhupada replied, echoing his homage to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta decades earlier. Quote, "Some admit and some don't admit. Admit you are a servant of Lord Krishna and your life will be a success." Another time in San Francisco, by the way, a reporter asked, "What will happen when you die?" And Prabhupada famously replied, "I will never die. I will live forever in my books." And then he said, "And you will utilize," he was telling a reporter, "you will utilize." So Prabhupada was writing, especially for people who were following him, but he was also writing for the whole world. As he said to Brahmananda in a car once in Los Angeles, "My books will be the law books for mankind, not just for ISKCON, for mankind for the next 10,000 years. So that gives us quite a vision of Prabhupada's position, not only in ISKCON, but the whole world. So therefore, a universal teacher. Next section, I call it Global Preacher. Between 1965 and 1977, Srila Prabhupada circled the globe 14 times, establishing the Krishna consciousness movement on every major continent. And now recently we hear that there's some devotee scientists based in the South Pole, and they're also having a little sangha. So Prabhupada didn't go to the pole continents because there were more penguins than people, right? But he would have gone if there was enough people. But now devotees are in the South Pole, Antarctica. Every major continent. He initiated nearly 5,000 disciples and inspired countless more to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At an age when most people wish to comfortably retire, Prabhupada kept up a non-stop preaching pace, tirelessly responding to his mission's demands. As he wrote one disciple, so this is in 1974, a devotee wrote Prabhupada inviting him to the San Francisco Rath Yatra in 74, which he did go to. And Prabhupada replied. Now Prabhupada, he's replying, in early May, and when he's replying, he's thinking of his European tour, which is just coming up. Quote, "Regarding your invitation that I attend the Rath Yatra Festival in San Francisco on July 7th, it is possible that I may attend depending on when I finish my European tour. I am due to arrive in Rome on May 23rd, then after a week, Geneva, then Paris, and possibly Stockholm, Germany, and England. If there is time, I can fly directly from Europe to Los Angeles and go to the festival. And of course, from LA, there's a little commuter hop up to San Fran too. So there's still more to go. Then, as you suggest, go to Australia Rath Yatra via Hawaii." Now that's crazy. That's crazy travel. I mean, even diplomats hardly travel as much as that. But Prabhupada, he was determined. And then Prabhupada ends the section of the letter by saying, "This is known as Jet Age Paribrajacharya." Letter to Jayatirtha, 5th May 74 from Bombay. Prabhupada's in Bombay. Astonishingly, Jet Age Prabhupada never knew jet lag. Oh, and by the way, Prabhupada did not make that, he didn't just make that out of the blue. That he said, this is known as Jet Age Parivrajacharya. Because the devotees brought it to Prabhupada's attention that a journalist at the Hindustan Times noticed Prabhupada's travel schedule and said, this is a Jet Age Swami. So Prabhupada liked that. So Prabhupada, in the letter, he said, this is known as Jet Age Parivrajacharya. Astonishingly, Jet Age Prabhupada never knew jet lag or ignored it if he did, instantly adapting to the time and his latest destination. And though most of his disciples were young enough to be his grandchildren, they could not keep up with him. As Prabhupada would sometimes say, quote, my desire is to spread Krishna consciousness everywhere at once. It was a phenomenon that the people who were traveling with Prabhupada got a glimpse of, that wherever Prabhupada was in the world, he just instantly adapted to the time. Now, for example, whenever I go to India, I haven't been there since early 2020, but it always takes me about a week to recover from the trip all the way from America. It just really takes its toll on the body. It's, crossing time zones. It really disturbs the life airs. So, but wherever Prabhupada, like if Prabhupada had arrived someplace at midnight, he would instantly start translating after it was all, his desk was set up and he was comfortably situated. Because that's what he did at midnight. It didn't matter to him where he had just come from or what time it was, like that. Or if it was 6 a.m. If he arrived someplace at 6 a.m., say, it would be time for the morning walk. He would walk half hour in one direction usually, and then half hour in another. Come back, greet the deities, accept Guru Puja, and give the Bhagavatam class. If it was getting on to noon, say Prabhupada arrived somewhere close to noon, then it would be time for his full body, hot oil massage. And so he would do that, and then he would dictate letters. People would, his secretary would read letters to him, and he would dictate responses while he was getting a massage. Oh, say it would be 6 p.m. It might be time to greet guests. So wherever Prabhupada traveled, he kept his schedule, which is just totally superhuman. Plus, he was writing at the same time. I mean, it's like totally superhuman. Okay, so universal teacher, global preacher. The next section I call matchless giver. That Srila Prabhupada founded over 100 Hare Krishna temples, schools, farms, restaurants, and affiliates like the BI, Bhaktivedanta Institute, all while writing and publishing dozens of translations and commentaries on foundational Vaishnava scriptures is simply superhuman. How did he do it? If any of you have ever tried to write something, especially major or anything, like I used to write, I still do a little bit, but BTG articles. So writing is such an intense meditation. You really have to just be in a peaceful place and not be in the middle of a lot of people, coming and going. But Prabhupada, he was in the middle of, he was the calm eye of the storm of the Hare Krishna explosion. He was exploding Krishna consciousness all over the world. And he was writing books at the same time. So how did he do it? For one thing, Prabhupada did not sleep much. After going to bed at 10, Prabhupada, he had that midday massage with oil, but then he had a dry massage before he'd go to sleep. After going to bed at 10, he would usually rise at midnight or 1 a.m. and write through the wee hours. If he had time, he would nap for maybe a half hour after breakfast and a full hour after lunch. His days and nights were a seamless weave of selfless service. No, it's not like our days and nights where there's a clear demarcation of, you're awake and then you get tired and then it's time to go to bed at night and then you're out for, 6 hours or whatever you need. In the books, Prabhupada says 6 to 8, depending on individual needs and how hard physically you're working. But Prabhupada, he wasn't like that. He never really got what we would call deep sleep, REM sleep. He would just nap. He would nap at night, and he'd get up and translate. He would nap after breakfast. He would nap after lunch. He was just like the 6 Goswamis. Nidraha vihada kadi vijito. He conquered over eating and sleeping for the sake of spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world as fast as possible, because he always told us, I don't know how much longer I have to live. I'm an old man, I could die at any time. So Prabhupada was just full guns, full on, nonstop. We say, pedal to the metal. His days and nights were a seamless weave of selfless service. Now, another short sleeper is the cow, to whom Prabhupada would sometimes compare himself. Guru Das recalls that in Bombay, he once told Prabhupada he was concerned that not enough people would come to a program the devotees had arranged. Prabhupada replied, "No, I'm like a cow. I give milk anywhere. That is what I like to do." Yeah. So Prabhupada, he just matchless giver, just giving, 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 giving. Practically, Prabhupada, he just wore his body out for us and for the whole world. He just wore his body out. Okay, next section I called Aveish Avatar. The Sri Chaitanya Chaitamrita Anchalila, chapter 7, text 11 states, quote, "The fundamental religious system in the age of Kali is the chanting of the holy name of Krishna. Unless empowered by Krishna, one cannot propagate the Sankirtan movement," unquote. Commenting on this verse in CC Antya 2:14, Prabhupada further identifies the one who empowers the spreader of the chanting. Quote, "And thus one is empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One cannot spread the holy names of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra throughout the world. Persons who do so are empowered. Therefore, they are sometimes called," Prabhupada writes, "aveish avatars," or empowered incarnations, for they are endowed with the power of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's a nice anecdote that Prabhupada's servant Hari Shauri, the writer of the Transcendental Diary series, tells that in 1976, Prabhupada's godbrother Sridhar Maharaj, His Holiness Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, visited Prabhupada in Mayapur, because in 73, Prabhupada and some of his disciples had paid a visit to Sridhar Maharaj in Navadvip at his Devananda Saraswat Mat. So in 76, by 76, Mayapur was starting to be built, and there was the Lotus building was built where Prabhupada's quarters are. And so Sridhar Maharaj visited Prabhupada in his quarters. And Hari Shauri said it was very sweet because Sridhar Maharaj was reminiscing with Prabhupada about the days in the 1930s when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had sent those three preachers to Europe, Ban Maharaj, Bhakti Saranga Maharaj, Sadananda Brahmachari, the German fellow who became a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta. So Sridhar Maharaj was reflecting on how when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta sent those three preachers to Europe, they didn't have much success. They just kind of interested some elderly lady in London. Ban Maharaj, actually, when they were in Germany, had an audience with one of Hitler's lieutenants. Amazing anecdote. Because, you know, Hitler was trying to establish the superiority. He was talking about a master race, right? Because the Germans, they were among the first scholars of the Vedas, but Hitler perverted the whole concept of Aryan. You know, an Aryan is one who knows the progressive values of life, we know from Prabhupada's Gita. But Hitler was thinking that an advanced person, an Aryan, was someone of a certain bodily type, genotype, Aryan. So Ban Maharaj, he had an audience with one of Hitler's lieutenants, and he was trying to enlighten this assistant of Hitler that actually the Aryan race, the Aryan person is spiritually advanced. It's got nothing to do with the body. We're not the body. And it's an advanced state of consciousness. It's not an advanced, it's not some bodily thing. So the lieutenant of Hitler said, okay, I will take this information to the Führer, to Hitler, and I'll let you know what he says. So Ban Maharaj waited because Hitler was in the vicinity. And then the lieutenant came back with a message from Hitler. We don't need your philosophy. It's kind of like, we don't need your fancy philosophy to tell us what an Aryan is. Hitler didn't want to hear it, right? So anyway, then Ban Maharaj left. And the famous story of Bhakti Saranga Maharaj when he was in the UK, and one of Prabhupada says, one Marquis of Zetland said, Swamiji, can you make me a Brahmin? And Bhakti Saranga said, oh yes, very easy. Simply you follow these principles. No intoxication, no illicit sex, no meat eating, no gambling. And famously, the Marquis said, impossible. So when these preachers were hearing things like this, you know, from the Europeans, that they couldn't even consider following, you know, the basic principles of human life from the spiritual viewpoint, avoiding intoxication, illicit sex, meat eating, and gambling. When they came back to India, and Bhaktisiddhanta did recall them after a couple of years because they weren't having much success, and it was very expensive to maintain his preachers in Europe. It was a very more expensive place. So Sridhar Maharaj was recalling this, and then he said, you know, Swami Maharaj, as he called our Prabhupada, you know, Swami Maharaj, when those preachers came back from Europe and they told us what they found with these Europeans, we began to think that, you know, Mahaprabhu's prediction, Prithivitiyachayata Nagaradi Gram, that in every town and village, it says in Chaitanya Bhagavad, my holy name will be preached. We thought this must be some poetic expression. Literally, how could it be true? These people can't even, what to speak of becoming Vaishnavas, they can't even consider following basic principles of human life. So we thought, this has got to just be some hyperbole, poetic exaggeration. But then Sridhar Maharaj said, but Swami Maharaj, you've done it. You actually went to the Western countries and turned these same people who were born and raised on these things, the forbidden activities. You've done it. Therefore, Shakti aveish. He was actually saying that Prabhupada had to be empowered directly. He was the aveish avatar. He was the one that was actually empowered to do this, because no one can do that unless they're empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Of course, the irony is that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had ordered all of his disciples who were capable to work cooperatively to do this. What Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had asked Prabhupada to do in 1922 and then confirmed in 1936, just before his passing, he had asked them all to do. Cooperate to spread Krishna consciousness in English in the Western countries, which was what the whole world was looking westward, because they were enamored of the Western material advancement. But Prabhupada, he was able to do it because of the depth of his surrender. His faith was absolute, complete, and therefore his empowerment was absolute and complete. Yes, okay. All right, so aveish avatar. Now, once an Indian Swami criticized Prabhupada's global preaching. No matter what you do in this world, as the saying goes, no good deed goes unpunished in Kali Yuga. So one Indian Swami, it might have been Vinod Bhave. Anyway, somebody noticed that Prabhupada was traveling around the world, preaching Sanatana Dharma, Bhagavad Dharma. So he criticized Prabhupada's global preaching by saying that if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had wanted Krishna consciousness in the Western countries, why didn't he go there himself? Pretty lame question, right? Why didn't he go there himself? To which Prabhupada replied, Prabhupada was so quick, to which Prabhupada replied, quote, he left the credit for me. He loves his devotee more than himself. The Prabhupada is boldly, purely saying he left the credit for me because Prabhupada was the only one that did it. Because Mahaprabhu had said, Yare Dako, right? Whoever you meet, Tare Kaha, tell them, Krishna Upadesh. Tell them what Krishna says. Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. Amara Gyai Guru Hanya, by my order, you be Guru. Tare Desh, save this land according to your capacity. So Prabhupada was able to actually do it on the level of Jagat Guru because he was totally surrendered to his spiritual master, who also was on the level of a Jagat Guru. Yes. More than himself. He loves his devotee more than himself. Yet Prabhupada always passed on that credit to others, to his followers, to his spiritual master, and finally to Krishna himself. It is a mark of Prabhupada's absolute transparency as an aveish avatar that he named his movement after Lord Krishna, not himself. It's the Hare Krishna movement, right? It's not the Bhaktivedanta Swami movement, who most of the world has yet to discover. That's our job. Now, in the wake of his disappearance, it's our job to introduce people to Prabhupada, because he was the one who actually surrendered enough to be empowered enough to revive Krishna consciousness all over the world. And, when people come in contact with Prabhupada's books, it's natural they want to get to know the author. It makes you want to read his books even more when you read something like the Prabhupada Lilamrita, or there's so many books now about by Prabhupada's first followers, my generation. Prabhupada in Australia, Prabhupada in Germany, Prabhupada in England, Prabhupada in all over the world. South Africa, Russia. Yeah. So when you read these accounts, then you get so much more out of actually reading Prabhupada's books. Reading books by Prabhupada, which are Shastra. He's simply giving us the Shastra, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. And reading books about Prabhupada. They're both equally potent because of Prabhupada's position as being very confidential servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. So, universal teacher, global preacher, matchless giver, aveish avatar. And now we start to get into, it's the transition to ISKCON, into ISKCON. So this section's called ISKCON's founder Acharya. If Srila Prabhupada is for everyone, he is certainly for everyone in ISKCON, because ISKCON is the vehicle Prabhupada founded to spread Krishna consciousness. As mentioned in lesson 9, so that's a previous lesson in the series, in 1994, ISKCON's governing body passed its first founder Acharya resolution. So in that lesson, I only gave the first point. So here is all of the points in that first founder Acharya resolution by the GBC in 94. There's about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. Number 1, Srila Prabhupada is the foundational Siksha Guru for all ISKCON devotees. 2, Srila Prabhupada's instructions are the essential teachings for every ISKCON devotee. Essential teaching. 3, Srila Prabhupada's books are the embodiment of his teachings and should be accepted as the standard by all future generations of ISKCON. We don't live in a vacuum. We're going to come across many books, not necessarily Prabhupada's books. But if we're actually Prabhupada followers, we say Prabhupada Anugas, then we'll see whatever we hear and read through Prabhupada's eyes. We'll measure everything against what Prabhupada has taught us. 4, Srila Prabhupada should be worshipped daily by every ISKCON member. Guru Puja. 5, every spiritual master is responsible to guide his disciples to follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions. That's a measure of our worth, our value as Shiksha and Diksha Gurus in ISKCON, by how we're enriching, enhancing, and deepening our disciples' relationship with our founder Acharya, our foundational guru. Now, more founder Acharya resolutions since then have identified our foundational relationship with Srila Prabhupada as the sublime pivot around which all our relationships in his society turn. As long as our relationships have Prabhupada at the center, then they're healthy and they're taking us closer to Krishna. Amid our ever-increasing diversity, Srila Prabhupada remains the unity. So ISKCON keeps expanding, 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 which is good, but if that expansion is to remain quality expansion, then Prabhupada has to be the center of it. Otherwise, we experience anxiety, what they call in the corporate world, mission drift, dissatisfaction. So now we go into ensuring that we have Prabhupada at the center of our own lives. So this is the same title as the lesson, Your Srila Prabhupada. So if you were born after Prabhupada's time, 1977 is when he left our vision, or never knew him when he walked among us, you may wonder what will happen to his society when the last, quote, Prabhupada disciple has left this world. Now, if we understand, quote, disciple in its literal meaning as follower, disciple comes from the Latin word, which literally means follower. We will realize that as the Hare Krishna movement continues to expand, Prabhupada's presence will likewise expand through his divine instructions. Despite our different Gurudevs, since we all share the same founder Acharya, generations will continue to follow Prabhupada into and out of this world, sharing Krishna's mercy with suffering humanity in many ways. So, which aspect of Srila Prabhupada inspires you the most? Prabhupada, the world Sankirtan party leader? Prabhupada, the divine writer? Prabhupada, the sublime chef? Prabhupada, the back to the land pioneer? You know, plain living, high thinking. Prabhupada, the cultural conqueror? The Vaishnavi empowerer? Prabhupada, the master educator? The founding father? The list goes on. A true transcendental Renaissance man. I don't know if you're acquainted with the concept of Renaissance man, but in European history, the Renaissance man was someone who, as they say, knew a little about everything and everything about something. He was well-rounded. As medieval Europe began, as humanity began to emerge from medieval Europe, and began to explore the natural world, you know, through science, especially, and philosophy, then is an idea of fulfilling human potential. On the one hand, it was a kind of, you know, it was the beginning of people moving in a secular direction away from God, but it was a reaction to these corrupt popes in Europe. So anyway, the archetypal Renaissance man was Leonardo da Vinci, who was a great artist. He gave us the Mona Lisa, famous European portrait, or portrait of a lady. And he also, his intelligence was so kind of broad that he also gave humanity the blueprints for what would become the helicopter. So it's not common that you find the brain and the personality of a fine artist in the same body with the brain and personality of a scientist, but he's like the archetypal Renaissance man, Da Vinci. So a true transcendental Renaissance man. Prabhupada is many-sided. So Prabhupada had many more sides to him than Da Vinci actually. But to whichever side we're attracted, there are standard ways to build a personal foundational relationship with this divine grace. It's because Prabhupada is all-sided, he's so many-sided, that no one person has all of Prabhupada. You know, we're inevitably, because we have our own natures, going to be attracted to a certain aspect of Prabhupada. So here's one way we can all connect with Prabhupada. Standard way, famous way. The section is called By Spiritual Sound. The first and foremost way we can all connect with Prabhupada is by becoming keen students of his spoken and written word. Regular attentive hearing from our founder Acharya, especially in the company of sincere and serious devotees, grounds us in the root relationship that nourishes us all. And now I'll give you an example of connecting by hearing. In August 1968, a new initiate in Montreal, that's a city in Canada, Quebec province, Canada. A new initiate in Montreal told Prabhupada she felt far away from his divine grace when he wasn't there in person. Prabhupada replied, so this is August 68, the movement's very young, it's only 2 years old. And my dear god sister Rukmini Mataji, who is the wife of our ISKCON's International Communications Minister, Anuttama Prabhu. So Rukmini was a 16-year-old girl, and she had traveled from San Francisco to Montreal with 3 couples from San Francisco, who later would go on to open up the London Yatra. It was Shyamsundar Malati, Gurudas and Jamuna, and Mukunda and Janaki. So Rukmini, or Wendy in San Francisco, she had met the devotees in San Francisco, which is where a lot of us went in those days to find, the counterculture, the revolution, the revolution we were looking for. Many went to San Francisco. It was the center of the counterculture. So she followed those 3 couples. They took her to Montreal. They said, you must meet Prabhupada. You're ready to become his disciple. So then she was initiated as Rukmini Devi Dasi on August 15th. And then on August 18th, Prabhupada gave a Bhagavatam class. And then after the class, he asked for questions. And then she timidly raised her hand. And you can hear her on the recording say, when you're not here, I feel so far away from you. It's like she's expressing loneliness, that she always just wants to be with him, physically. So then you hear Prabhupada say this. And he didn't say Vani and Bapu. He said 2 English words. So Prabhupada replied, quote, oh, he's responding to the fact that she's saying, I feel distant from you. I feel lonely, distant, far away. Oh, that you should not think. There are 2 conceptions of the spiritual master, the physical conception and the vibration conception. So physical conception is temporary. The vibration conception is eternal. Just like we are enjoying or we are relishing the vibration of Krishna's teachings. So by vibration, he is present. As soon as we chant Hare Krishna or chant Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavad, so he is present immediately by his vibration. So we should give more stress on the sound vibration, either of Krishna or of the spiritual master. Then we'll feel happy and no separation. Unquote. So Prabhupada he broadened the answer by saying, whether you're thinking of Guru or Krishna, you think of the instruction, the vibration, the teaching, and you'll feel happy and you won't feel separation. And that has so much power in Prabhupada saying it, because that's what Prabhupada did. Separated from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta for decades, Prabhupada would nonetheless say he always felt his spiritual master right by his side. How? By absolute absorption in studying and presenting Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's teachings. In the same way, in the company of sincere and serious devotees, absorbed in studying and presenting Prabhupada's teachings, we will also feel Prabhupada's presence in our lives. And now I give you an example of 2 people from my generation who did that, who they made hearing from Prabhupada their life and soul. I'm just going to take a little drink here. And they're rather famous devotees. I know you've heard of them, even though you may have never met them. Well, one you definitely didn't meet because he passed away in 1977. But the section is called 2 exemplars, 2 great examples of being connected to Prabhupada through sound. In this connection, 2 exemplary devotees from my generation come to mind, Jamuna Devi and Jayananda Prabhu. So I know you've heard of Jayananda because he's on the ISKCON calendar. Prabhupada stunned us all after Jayananda passed away and said, you should have a day. Just like we have a day for honoring previous acharyas like Bhaktivinoda and Bhaktisiddhanta and Gorkishore. So you should have one for Jayananda. So we were, whoa. We knew Jayananda was a wonderful devotee, but we didn't know his stature until Prabhupada said that. So Jamuna Devi and Jayananda. In 1967, Jamuna and Jayananda were among the first to join Srila Prabhupada's movement in San Francisco, because they also went to San Francisco looking for, higher consciousness and some kind of revolution. We were all looking for revolution and higher consciousness. Deeply dedicated to Prabhupada from the start, they were also as different as night and day. To meet Jamuna was to meet a priestess of devotion, expressed most wonderfully through her cooking, singing, and deity worship. Prabhupada, the cultural conqueror, came through Jamuna. So when you met Jamuna, I had the good fortune to know Jamuna after Prabhupada passed away. I got to know her in the 90s and then early 2000s before she passed away. When you were with Jamuna, she was giving you, what was coming through Jamuna was Prabhupada's culture, his cultured personality, especially through her cooking. And when she sang, and every morning we hear Jamuna sing the Govinda prayers, we have darshan. And the way she worshiped the deity. Prabhupada personally trained her in deity worship in London after he installed Radhalambinishwara. Then he trained Jamuna for 6 days, nonstop. It was like a marathon, because then Prabhupada had to move on, and then she stayed in London to take care of those famous deities whom Prabhupada said was his favorite deities in the whole world. Now, Jayananda was as strong as an ox. He was a big guy. He was like 6'2" or 3. And when you looked at his hands, he had these big hands. Each finger was like a tool. Jayananda was as strong as an ox and humble as grass. A mechanical engineer by training, Jayananda was a tireless worker who was perhaps most beloved for building huge chariots for ISKCON's annual Ratha Yatra parades. Prabhupada's surpassing strength and humility came through Jayananda. Different as they were, Jamuna and Jayananda both had a deep love for hearing from Srila Prabhupada. By developing a similar love and a deep dedication to serving Prabhupada's mission, one or more of our beloved founder Acharya, I gotta edit this now. I see a mistake in the script. One or more of our beloved founder Acharya's aspects, let me write that, will also shine through us. So we hear about these famous devotees, and they, were walking with Prabhupada personally. Like, there's pictures of Jamuna and Jayananda and the others walking with Prabhupada in Golden Gate Park. Jamuna had a lot of association with Prabhupada in India, famously in this 1971 Kumbh Mela, and also in Vrindavan. She was cooking for Prabhupada every day in October, November, when Prabhupada was giving these famous Nectar Devotion lectures that went on for weeks. And Jamuna was personally cooking for Prabhupada and serving him in those Radha Damodar rooms, famous rooms where Prabhupada was living alone in the 60s, translating Bhagavatam and commenting. So why were they so advanced? Because they took advantage of Prabhupada's matchless gifts, of hearing from him. But they were different people. They had different natures. So naturally, when you met them, you would access a different aspect of Prabhupada. With Jayananda, it was Prabhupada, the strong worker, tireless worker. With Jamuna, it was that cultural conqueror. So we can also, because we have natures, if we become absorbed in our foundational spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya, in him, we will, when people meet us, we will also be able to convey an aspect of Prabhupada according to our nature. Yeah. So the parampara goes on. So by hearing, and now also another way is by serving his mission. Since some dubious devotional groups prematurely focus on seeing Krishna face to face, Prabhupada admonished his followers that the best way to see Krishna is to serve his mission under the guidance of his pure devotee, the spiritual master. So here's a quote from the fourth canto. It's rather astonishing that Prabhupada's equating seeing Krishna face to face with becoming committed to the mission. Prabhupada said that's the same thing. Listen to this quote. This is from the fourth canto purport. When one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, his resolution is tantamount to seeing the supreme personality of Godhead. Instead of being eager to see the Lord in some bush of Vrindavan, Prabhupada can't resist taking a swipe at the Sahajas, while at the same time engaging in sense gratification, if one instead sticks to the principle of following the words of the spiritual master, he will see the Supreme Lord without difficulty, unquote. Or as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would say, quote, don't try to see God. You work in such a way that God will see you, unquote. Prabhupada told us that. And when that work is done cooperatively in Prabhupada's mission, synergizing the efforts of different generations, Krishna sees and blesses us manyfold. We have so much diversity, so many generations of devotees from so many different parts of the world, different language cultures. But when we work together and we all hear from Srila Prabhupada, absorbed in his life, teachings, mood, and mission, then that gives us the unity to spread Krishna consciousness everywhere. And this, the second to last section, or not second to last, but we're getting close to the end now before we discuss. This is called No Jumping Over. In the early 1970s, as more Western devotees began to visit India, some became fascinated by the books in English of our Gaudiya forebears, our predecessors, especially Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Srila Bhakti Vinod. So they asked Prabhupada if they could read them. You know, they were going to India with Prabhupada starting in the early 70s, and then they'd see these books in the Gaudiya Mats, you know, in English, books by Bhaktivinoda Bhaktisiddhanta. So they asked Prabhupada if they could read them. Prabhupada was not pleased by their request. Quote, this is a quote from Prabhupada. You cannot imagine what my spiritual master said, or even if you read some books, you cannot understand unless you understand it from me. This is called parampara system. You cannot jump over to the superior guru, neglecting the next acharya, immediate next acharya, unquote. So it's kind of ironic because or paradoxical. It sounds like, because Prabhupada said that to us, he actually said that in 73 in Los Angeles. He was the only spiritual master in the Hare Krishna movement. Now in the Hare Krishna movement, we have multiple spiritual masters. So someone could easily think, well, I can't read Prabhupada's books because he's not my immediate next acharya. He's, he came before my Gurudev. But it's not like that. Since during his time with us, Srila Prabhupada was the only genuine spiritual master we knew, we didn't fully appreciate his unique position as our founder acharya. Prabhupada is not simply a previous acharya, in other words. He's everyone's founder acharya, foundational spiritual master. In ISKCON's multiple guru culture today, we've come to realize that a prime duty of our initiating and instructing spiritual masters is to deepen, enhance, and enrich our foundational relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Okay. I'm going to correct this too. Yeah. Okay, that's all right. So if, quote, no jumping over, unquote, means no neglecting one's, quote, immediate next acharya, unquote, how much more does that mean no neglecting Srila Prabhupada, our founder acharya, from whom we derive our core identity and through whom we see all teachers and teachings? I mean, whose books are we reading every day in class, right? Whose Murti are we worshiping every day at Guru Puja? Whose mission are we, ISKCON mission are we prosecuting? Srila Prabhupada's. So that's the foundational relationship. That's the core identity. And based on that, then we can have healthy Siksha and Diksha relationships with our gurus. And the more deeply our spiritual masters connect us with Srila Prabhupada, the more responsibility we have to pass on his unique legacy to others. So on that note, this section is called Imbibe, take it in, and impart, and give it. When Srila Prabhupada sees we're sincerely following him, he blesses us with the realization to pass on his teachings in ways both faithful and fitting. Prabhupada explains, so it's one of my favorite purports of how to be both, faithful and to Prabhupada's teachings and how to pass them on in very creative ways that catches the ear of the audience, because the times are always changing. So it's been 50 years, right, since Prabhupada gave us his books and his spoken word. It's a whole different time. I mean, India 50, if you folks are in India, I mean, Delhi 50 years ago is not the Delhi of today, or Bombay, or Vrindavan for that matter. So the material scene is always shifting, it's always changing. So we have to be able to deliver the message in ways that reach people today. So Prabhupada explains this in his purport to Bhagavatam 141. The chapter is the appearance of Narada. Quote, personal realization does not mean that one should, out of vanity, attempt to show one's own learning by trying to surpass the previous acharya. He must have full confidence in the previous acharya. And at the same time, he must realize the subject matter so nicely that he can present the matter for the particular circumstances in a suitable manner. And then Prabhupada puts this next sentence in italics. It's right in the Bhagavatam. The original purpose of the text must be maintained. So you have to keep the purpose or the essence of the text intact. That's Prabhupada's emphasis. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, no obscure meaning should be screwed out of it. Yet, and then he turns, yet it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. This is called realization. How to keep that original intent, that spirit, that purpose of the Shastra intact, but then package it, present it in ways that are novel, creative, so it catches the ear, it catches the eye of the new audience. That takes, Prabhupada said, that's called realization. And we're blessed with that realization the more we actually follow the instructions of Srila Prabhupada in his books. So to imbibe and impart Prabhupada's legacy is to become gurus in our own right, not to imitate or replace our founder Acharya, but to follow in his footsteps. Quote, because people are in darkness, this is Prabhupada, let's see, when did he say this? He said this in Hawaii, 1974. January. Quote, because people are in darkness, we require many millions of gurus to enlighten them. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission is, he said, that, quote, every one of you become guru. Yeah, not just a handful. We wanted everybody to grow up and according to our capacity, act as spiritual masters. So the last, what I do to end this, I've borrowed a page or taken a leaf from the book that Giriraj Prabhu mentioned. Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, was published by the GBC in 2014. The author was Srila Prabhu. He was the writer, philosopher on our GBC committee called Srila Prabhupada's Position. And in 2014, Ravindra Prabhu's writing had been sufficiently edited by us and vetted, and we put Ravindra through his paces to get it right philosophically and by the tone, to show how Prabhupada is everybody's foundational spiritual master. Now, as Prabhu mentioned, Giriraj Prabhu mentioned, it's written in a very high, it's written in academic discourse. It's like a PhD dissertation. So most people, even if they read the book, and it was circulated widely 7 years ago in 2014. A lot of people don't even know it now because it's 7 years on. But even if they read it, maybe they didn't quite understand it. So when I travel with my seminars, or when I'm doing this, I'm trying to convey the essence of the book, of the realization that Prabhupada is everyone's foundational spiritual master. So in his GBC authorized booklet, Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, Srila Prabhu concludes by listing the benefits of deeply understanding Prabhupada's unique transcendental position, especially for all who serve his movement. Okay, so Ravindra ended the booklet by giving some, as we say, bullet points. He summed up the whole presentation in 5 or 6 points. I'm reading, let's see here, 7 points. Okay. All right, so this will sum it up and then we'll open up for discussion. Number 1, generation after generation will be able to receive the special mercy offered by Srila Prabhupada. This is what we're talking about, benefits of understanding Srila Prabhupada's unique transcendental position. So again, generation after generation will be able to receive the special mercy offered by Srila Prabhupada. The path back to Godhead he opened will be ever increasingly traveled. I mean, it's such an opulent path. Wherever you go in the world, Prabhupada, he founded 108 temples, believe it or not, right on the nose. And now we have, some say 600, some say 800. We have so many centers now, affiliates all over the world. So wherever you go in the world, you're not far from, if not a center, you're not far from devotees everywhere, whether it's Russia or South America or Africa or North America, Europe. Prabhupada gave an infrastructure. He established centers where we have his morning program, evening program, restaurants, schools. It's quite a path that Prabhupada opened. Number 2, Srila Prabhupada's active presence will secure the unity and integrity of ISKCON. So active presence. That means he lives forever by his divine instructions. We don't see Srila Prabhupada as having lived, he's a former, he's dead and gone. No, his active presence. He reasons ill who tells that Vaishnavas die. Bhaktivinoda famously had that inscription put on Haridas Thakur's tomb in Puri. When thou art living, still and sound, the Vaishnav dies to live, and living tries to spread the holy name around. And how Prabhupada did that like no one ever did. So Srila Prabhupada's active presence will secure the unity and integrity of ISKCON, strengthening both the GBC and guru-disciple bonds. We need both those lines of authority, and they should not conflict. You know, the management system Prabhupada gave us, GBC and, you know, regional secretaries, now they're restructuring it. They have different names, global duty officers, etc. Temple presidents, right down into your little community there in the Delhi area. There's lines of authority. And then the line of authority coming from guru disciple, right? They shouldn't conflict, they should complement. If we're faithful to Prabhupada, we'll cooperate and work together. 3, by taking full shelter of Srila Prabhupada as Siksha Guru in his Vani manifestation, all teachers in ISKCON on various levels of advancement will be able to authentically, there's the key word, convey Srila Prabhupada's real teaching, thus giving proper guidance, shelter, and protection to all. I have a godbrother, maybe you know him from the internet, Mahatma Prabhu. He's very active online. And so he's besides initiating people, he also counsels people a lot, just in general, because he studied that. He studied how to be a counselor. And so when he travels, you know, when he'll travel again, like most of us, people say, you know, when people want his association, his advice, his guidance, Mahatma says, then I go into doctor mode. You know, like when you go to a doctor, he'll ask for your symptoms, right? Write them down or express them in words. So I say, one of the first things I say is, so are you reading Prabhupada's books? How are your rounds? Are you associating with devotees favorably? You know, he just goes down like a checklist, right? So by asking these questions, these very pointed personal questions, then the devotees that he's counseling, they begin to take inventory of themselves. And by the time he's through, you know, with the questions, they understand that if they're deficient in any of these areas, these major areas that he's asked about, that's why they're having trouble. And very often, you know, after counseling somebody, then he'll present what he's presenting, and then he'll keep traveling. And then he might write him a letter. How are you doing? And the person will say, oh, fine. You know, after, you know, I just started reading Prabhupada's books again, or I just started chanting my rounds in the morning, or he just took their temperature, so to speak, and then he reminded them what they had to do to be healthy, and they did it. So similarly, taking full shelter of Prabhupada. So we tend to, sometimes we get ill. ISKCON becomes ill in certain areas. You know, somebody goes off because they start drifting away from Prabhupada's life and teachings. And then that becomes a very dangerous situation. Sometimes all of ISKCON historically has become ill. And the remedy is always getting back to being absorbed in Prabhupada's life, teachings, mood, and mission. Number 4, ISKCON's teachings will remain consistent over space and time, because the nature of, you know, distance and time is that it tends to dissipate us. It tends to divide us, and things get watered down and dissipated over time. But if Prabhupada, his mood and mission and his life and teachings remain the center, then everything will stay very consistent. And here's a related one, number 5. Prabhupada's realized knowledge, endowing him with a specific potency to spread Krishna consciousness, will be not only preserved, but also developed. when we come in contact with Vani Prabhupada, everlasting Prabhupada, eternal Prabhupada, through his sound, through the books or his spoken word, we realize that Prabhupada spoke and wrote about things that we've only scratched the surface. I mean, there's so much to do. When Prabhupada was speaking and writing, he was writing for the next 10,000 years. So it's very inspiring and challenging when we dive into Prabhupada's teachings, because in every field of human endeavor, practically, there's so much opportunity to spread Krishna consciousness, whatever one's walk of life is. Okay. Not only preserved, but also developed. Number 6, his books will remain central to us, for they contain insights and directions that await future development to be realized. Same point, basically. For example, Varnashram. Prabhupada said that's the great 50% of his mission, right at the end. He said it was, he hadn't done. It was Brahmananda, actually. Swami at the time asked him, because Prabhupada this was in, getting toward the end now. It was obvious that Prabhupada's Leela, his manifest Leela, was winding down. So Brahmananda asked Prabhupada, do you have any regrets? And Prabhupada said, no, I have no regrets. My God, Prabhupada fulfilled the order of his spiritual master. So unbelievably, it was, nobody ever could imagine what Prabhupada was able to do by surrendering to the mercy of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the whole parampara was behind him. They were empowering him to do what he did. I have no regrets. And then he checked himself. He said, no, actually, I have one lamentation. He said, one lamentation. And then Brahmananda guessed. He made a guess of what that was. He said, that you haven't finished translating the Srimad Bhagavatam? And that was a good guess, because wherever Prabhupada was, day or night, come hell or high water, Prabhupada insisted on translating. So he never, that was his life and soul, his magnum opus, giving the world Srimad Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada said, no, that I have not shown you how to do Varnashram, live in Varnashram. So that's a big area. I mean, you could translate that Sanskrit word now into so many preaching fronts. The eco village preaching, or why is there climate change, right? Why is there climate change going on? Well, that's related to how humanity is messing with Mother Nature. And nature is striking back big time. Severe weather. And that bleeds over into, the medical field. Why are we having a pandemic? Oh my God. So Varnashram is a big, the way to live the way Krishna lived. He showed us how to live when he came to earth. Plain living and high thinking. And then finally, number 7, Srila Prabhupada's eyes will always remain the lens through which all future generations see our predecessor acharyas. I mean, in the first canto, I think it's in the first purport, 111, Prabhupada's inviting the reader, it's a multi-page purport, to peruse, to check out, to read the works of the Goswamis. Of course, before you do that, you better understand ABC, right? Before you go to XYZ. But even when we're reading the works of the Goswamis, if we ever do, of course, we already have one by the BBT translated, or they published, our late great Gopi Puranadana Prabhu's translation of Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which Prabhupada said everyone who's serious about devotional service must read. So that's Sanatana Goswami. Even when we're reading that, we're hearing it through Prabhupada's eyes. That's why it's such an authentic translation and commentary, because Gopi Puranadhana Prabhu was so faithful to Prabhupada's voice and his mood and his mission. He was right in line with Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so I'll say that again. All those benefits, those 7 benefits of deeply understanding Prabhupada's position. In this case, the topic as Srila Prabhupada is our foundational Shiksha Guru, accrue to devotees who realize their core identity as Prabhupada's followers. Inspired by our, quote, our Prabhupads, and our Prabhupads are always going to be very personal and individual, and they'll be the same overall, but we'll all have a unique relationship with Srila Prabhupada, because Prabhupada's a Mukta Purush. Anybody can have a relationship with Prabhupada who follows him deeply. Prabhupada's not limited by time or space. Inspired by, quote, our Prabhupads, we will cooperate, even when we disagree, to bring the Lord's mercy to everyone. I can't imagine a better way to please Srila Prabhupada, our beloved founder Acharya. Now, I'm in a little bind here, because now is the time when we're supposed to have discussion. And you know what? I've run out of time. Giriraj Prabhu, I wonder, let's see. I wonder if we can do another session just for discussion. What do you think of that idea?
Yes, that will be very nice, Prabhuji. It will be it will give us time to absorb what we have heard, and then maybe another Friday we can have another session to discuss, because it is what you've given, even this 10th part of the seminar is quite a bit, and
yes.
quite a time to absorb. And also I wanted devotees to open up and see how to practically apply it, not in a sentimental manner, but to see him as our preeminent Shiksha Guru, and how to be a Prabhupada Anuga, like you said, to understand that term. So it will be wonderful. It will be wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, now I don't know what your, ordinarily, as I said, Friday would be the best for me, but if we did it on Sunday, is that too soon? It would be Sunday evening your time, but it would be Sunday morning my time. Okay. Is that maybe you have a Sunday festival that starts late? I don't know.
You can raise your hand Sunday evening. You can hear. Okay, Sunday evening is fine.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't see some hands go up there. I'm wondering if some people won't be.
Raise both hands. And say Hari Bol. Yes.
Wow. Oh, you people are very enthusiastic. That's great. Okay. I don't want too much time to pass on this. And also here in America, we're approaching Christmas. And I got a lot of heavy stuff that I have to do for putting on a Christmas thing at the temple here in Tucson. So it's better if I just do it this weekend, because the next weekend is Christmas. So, okay. So that's going to be, 8 p.m. Sunday evening, yeah?
Yes.
That'll be, what's the day?
It will be
the 19th?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll do the 19th. And I'm so grateful you're able to do that. Thank you very much. And in the meantime, I guess you can try to digest everything that I was saying. Maybe so you recorded it, that's good. You can go back and listen. And you know what you do? When you're digesting that, then come back with some real good questions. Come back with some real pointed questions for me. Put me on the spot, because I said a lot of things, right? And in this Essentials series, I just sort of say the main things, and it needs a lot of discussion. So yeah, if you can come back with some questions, that would really help us, because we'll have a whole hour for questions and discussion, questions and comments. So nice to be with you all. Haven't been in Delhi since 2016, I think. I was there. Yeah, I did the whole thing in Delhi live. But that was 5 years ago. Okay.
So, thank you so very much.
Thank you for inviting me. We'll see you in 2 days. I'll be here just a little before, maybe 5 to the hour. I'll just come in.
Yes, Prabhu. Okay.
Okay.
So, yes, thank you so very much, Prabhu, and we are very grateful. And we heartily thank Prabhuji by loudly chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. See you soon.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.